what is a backend application? To answer that, you first need to understand why a database cannot be made publicly available. You cannot allow a client or a user to access everything within the database because it may have some data which is personal to a user, it may have company specific data, it may have secret credentials, and so on. Imagine a social media platform where anyone can post anything from anyone's account, an app where there is no authentication and no authorization. It would be chaotic, right? You have no privacy and no security. Would you use such an app? Now imagine an app which has an importance of national security. If the database is exposed to an end user, is the app secure anymore? A backend application solves these problems. You don't make the database public. In fact, you create a backend application which will access the database instead. At the first glance, it may seem like you can access the database because you can access the backend application, but it does not work like that. With a backend application, you can share any data. And here data means files, text, JSON, XML, and so on. A backend application is responsible for sharing a piece of data in an efficient way, ensuring both authentication and authorization. But how does a backend application achieve that? The answer is through APIs. API stands for Application Programming Interface, which is a set of definitions and protocols for building and integrating different applications. An end user or any application or software can only access a backend application through APIs without revealing how the work is done behind the scenes. To create an API in a backend application, you create a function like reading something from the database, updating something in the database, or any complex task involved, and then expose this function to an API endpoint, where endpoint is just a simple URL. Now, users can get a particular job done by accessing an API through an endpoint. For example, on a social media platform, if a user wants to create a post in their feed, you create a function where you add data in the database and then expose this function to an endpoint like api.revampedbrains.com/createpost. You can create similar APIs to read and update data as well. But how to ensure authentication and authorization? You send additional data to these API endpoints, which helps the backend application figure out who is accessing the API. To create a post in your feed, you send some additional data like a user token, which you would have received from the backend application before. Then the backend updates the database if it verifies the user based on the user token, or else sends an error message. That is all you need to know about APIs for now. By any chance, if you're confused, don't worry. Just grab the concepts for now. We'll be studying these concepts in much more detail in future playlists. So what is the difference between a front-end and a back-end application? To visit a website, you go to a URL in your browser and download the front-end application. Then this front-end application runs in your browser. Alright? But when you want to access a backend application, you don't download a backend application. The front-end application gets any task done through APIs created by the backend application. So that was a high-level overview on backend applications. In the next video, we'll learn more about databases. So stay tuned.